Thank you so much again for being here. Aloha, Maikako, and mahalo for joining us this evening. We begin by grounding ourselves in a truth long held in Hawaiian tradition that the kumu, the teacher, is not merely an instructor, but the very source, the root, the foundation from which knowledge, values, and life itself flows. The kumu is a guide, a protector, and a steward of the next generation. In that way, our educators carry not just curriculum, but the kuleana, the sacred responsibility to nurture and to protect Keiki just as parents do. This evening, we're here because that sacred trust is being threatened. I want to express my deep appreciation to the voices joining us in this urgent conversation, including my newly selected Director of Community Engagement, Sergio Alcabula, the President of the Hawaiʻi State Teachers Association, Osa Tui, the Executive Director of the Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights, Liza Ryan Gill, and Congresswoman Jill Tokuda, whose leadership and courage remind us that justice is a fight worth showing up for every day. At a time when immigration enforcement and ICE activity are creating real fear in our communities, we must be clear. Hawaii is and must remain a place where immigrants are welcomed with dignity and not suspicion. Teachers are guardians of our children after their parents. They are mentors, protectors, and defenders of truth. And just as we would shield our own children from harm, we must shield those who stand beside them every day. Our schools should be sanctuaries, not sites of surveillance. And our teachers should never be put in the impossible position of choosing between their moral obligation to protect their students, as well as their civil responsibility to adhere to the law, particularly when law enforcement agencies engage in questionable actions that harm our students and their families. We are in a moment where trust in enforcement systems is deeply fractured. And in response, we must meet fear, not with silence, but with the full strength of our faith, our hope, our courage, and our collective bravery. We must hold fast to our rights and boldly declare that everyone, regardless of where they were born, deserves safety, dignity, and belonging. Musi Ganjali, an art teacher from Kalakaua Middle School, shared with me the following. There is no teacher in our Hawaii public education system that does not have at least one student who is an immigrant, meaning that this issue of how to engage immigration enforcement when they threaten students is something that impacts all of us. So when Representative Tokuda called me to ask ACLU of Hawaii to host a Know Your Rights workshop for educators, we jumped on the opportunity because we know its impact. With a small staff of only a dozen employees, we cannot bring every piece of litigation or legislation to fight for our collective rights. We need you all as teachers, guardians, working with us to ensure that you use your rights and you push back against government overreach with confidence and grace. The civil rights movement is not something of the past. It is happening right now in this moment, and our educators are a vital part of it. As Henry Adams wrote, a teacher affects eternity. They can never tell where their influence stops. The actions you take to safeguard our keiki are etched in their hearts and memories and are part of their nascent psychological memory, which impacts not just them, but generations that come afterwards. So thank you for taking your time to know your rights and to use them. Mahalo for joining us tonight. I'll pass it off to Representative Tokuda.
Thank you so much, Salma. Apologies for my technical difficulties up here in DC, but truly appreciate all of you being on this call. And first of all, while I can't see your faces, I know that those that are on this webinar, you, as Salma has mentioned, you are on the front lines. You're our protectors, you're our guardians. For those of you who are educators, you're not just teaching our children about history, about reading, writing themselves, our culture, their culture, who they are. Really, you are safeguarding and paving the pathway for our future. So I am truly grateful for every single one of you. This Know Your Rights seminar that we're doing right now came out of just heartbreaking conversations that I had while I was home the other week, both, talking on Maui, in in a library in Kona. It was heartbreaking to hear about children who were looking over their shoulders, afraid to walk home, feeling as if they were being used as bait to somehow entrap their family or their loved ones that lived with them. The fact that teachers are having conversations in the final weeks of school with their students about the fact that they were afraid to talk about their story and their journey here in this country. It should never be a bad thing to talk about your journey, who you are, what made you who you are. And yet we are living in a world of fear right now. And as educators, as community advocates and leaders, it really is our responsibility and job to, one, support each other, stick together, but also we really have to find our power in knowledge and have the courage to be able to use it effectively. And so this really was the genesis of tonight, just the heartbreak I heard from so many teachers and community members who wanted to do more. But quite frankly, even with the basic knowledge that they have, ICE is 3 steps ahead of us, because at the end of the day, they are not following the law. We are in the midst of a constitutional crisis right now. I'm not an attorney, but quite frankly, that's what I feel when I'm right here in DC in this moment. The rule of law, due process, it's all under fire. We see it absolutely every day. We wake up to so much egregious actions from this administration. From day one, rescinding birthright citizenship, utilizing, a wartime law that, quite frankly, was used back in the day to intern my great grandfather, my relatives as well, used to summarily deport Venezuelans. We saw that happening. And just today alone, as I was leaving the Capitol to come back here to my apartment, hearing about how President Trump and ICE have sent migrants from Vietnam and Myanmar to Sudan. No due process law to a third, to a country that they did not come from, not familiar with, a war-torn country where no doubt their lives are in danger, defying court orders, I should add. And so we're in a very, it's a scary place that we all find ourselves in right now. And as we all know on this call, Hawaii is a close-knit community. We're all 1 degree of separation from knowing somebody who is right now living in fear, worried that they could be picked up off the streets, where they could be deported, even if they have no grounds to, too many looking over their shoulder and fearing for their lives right now. And so we need to, as I said, we need to meet this moment with knowledge and with courage, and by supporting each other. So I just want to thank all of you. Looking forward to the conversation we have tonight. Appreciate you joining. It is a little late for me, but I will tell you this. In a few hours, there are a number of us who are going to take to the steps of the Capitol. We are going to pile into the Rules Committee hearing, and we are going to be demanding that this big bad bill be destroyed. And so I know that's not quite what we're talking about tonight, but it's definitely part of what we have to do in meeting this moment with resistance and courage. So thank you again, Sama. And at this point, I will, I believe, turn it over to Osa, my good friend and Castle High School classmate from back in the day. Osa?
Hello, Representative Tokuda, my friend Jill. Again, I'm also the president of the Hawaiʻi State Teachers Association, and very disturbed on what we saw happening on Maui and what we continue to see happening on the Big Island. Teachers, as you know, we care for our keiki and their well-being. Likewise, our community, we care about our teachers and those who are here to help our keiki. Recently, we sent a letter to the Hawaii Department of Education asking them for 3 things. The first thing is mandatory training for school-level administrators on how to handle visits and inquiries from ICE and related agencies, on employee rights, both federally and under Hawaii Department of Education policy, and the boundaries of cooperation with ICE and those related agencies. Second thing we asked for is for the department to affirm non-retaliation, that no employee will face retaliation, discipline, or negative consequences for refusing to cooperate, and that no penalty will be given for seeking union representation or in the exercising of their legal rights. And thirdly, we asked the department to provide template letters or guidance for communicating with families, including what are the rights of our students, how are families going to be contacted, and how student privacy will be protected regarding immigration status. We appreciate the Board of Education and Chair Roy Takumi, who have reaffirmed the foundational guarantees for access to free public education, regardless of immigration status, and reinforcing that student safety must take priority over compliance with outside agency requests. We send our mahalo to Senators Hirono and Schatz and also Representative Tokuda here with us this evening, who have all been actively advocating in this space. I especially want to thank the ACLU for conducting this Know Your Rights webinar for our educators. It was a session provided to our members similar to this one, which provided valuable information and proved to be most helpful on the day that the Maui teachers were rated. While we hope this never happens again, we also hope that you too will find this most helpful going forward. Mahalo.
Thank you so much, Osa. Thank you so much, Representative. I also wanted to acknowledge the time at 11:50 p.m., I guess, in DC, where you're joining us, showing your dedication and commitment to your constituents. So we all appreciate you so much for just your presence and your voice. And I also forgot to mention two panelists folks might see on the screen. I wanted to acknowledge the hard work of Emily Sarasa, who is our policy field fellow at the ACLU of Hawaii, as well as Nathan Lee, who's our policy legislative fellow of the ACLU of Hawaii. And they'll be sharing some additional remarks and training and helping us kind of usher in the questions today. So without further ado, I'll let Sergio get started with Liza and Nathan to start the training portion of the workshop.
Thank you very much, everyone. And we want to be aware of everyone's time. I know that there were a lot of questions that were submitted, and we can just go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, Selma. Okay, this is just our brief agenda. We're going to do a short round of introductions, just and then an overview of the state of immigration, who the agencies are that are enforcing immigration law, what are your rights as individuals, and then what are your rights in the school settings, and then we'll leave time for a Q&A afterwards, because I think that is what people are really interested in. Okay, so just who we are really quick. So the American Civil Liberties Union of Hawaii upholds and defends the civil rights and liberties granted under the U.S. Constitution, Hawaii Constitution, and other states and federal laws. I do want to invite Liza Ryan Gill, if she can just share a little bit more about HCIR.
Mahalo, Sergio. I'll be super fast. Aloha mai kako, Liza Ryan Gill, she, her, a Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights was refounded at the beginning of COVID for the express purpose of bringing together for power and policy about all of our immigrant serving and led organizations across the Pai'aina to push forward pro-immigrant legislation at the state and county, as well as to push back against anti-immigrant federal legislation that we see. We are here and active in all the policy spaces and with our administrators at multiple levels and assisting our coalition members like Aloha Latinos and Roots Reborn across Hawaii that are dealing with the negative impacts of this aggressive enforcement by Department of Homeland Security. So look forward to talking more.
Thanks, Liza. And then as Selma had mentioned, I wanted to introduce two of our policy fellows, Nathan Lee and Emily Sarasa, that are really doing the hard work behind the scenes on this. So I just want to appreciate them and really thank you for being part of this. Okay, note, just as a reminder, this training is for public education. It is not legal advice. I know there's a few attorneys in the room here, but again, this is for public education and it is not legal advice. We ask that you please contact our community legal service providers or a private immigration attorney for questions that are very fact specific. Our goal really through this session is to increase community empowerment by providing accurate information and education. Knowledge is really power to combat community fear at the moment. We want to put this legal resources out. So there's the Hawaii American Immigration Lawyers Association Deportation Defense Hotline. So those are for folks that are in detention. These are the phone numbers there. The Legal Clinic is another nonprofit organization that you can contact. They'll do an intake for you, see if you qualify for services. And also Roots Reborn Maui is another organization that is providing direct legal services. So we want to be thankful for these two organizations for sharing their knowledge in Manawa with us. And, this work really takes all of us at the moment. And we will share that information again later. Okay. So just in context, the federal government is tasked with immigration enforcement. Just because, we are discussing here with school teachers, immigration enforcement is not the role of school teachers and our Department of Education. So that is the federal government's task. The redaction of the sensitive location policy on January 20th by the Trump administration puts people in schools, churches, hospitals at a renewed risk. Previously, those were, considered more safe spaces, but, with this recent policy change, it does increase the risk. However, it does not change the risk of immigrants or the responsibilities of school districts to students. So on May 9th, the administration announced Project Homecoming, which includes in part deputizing and contracting with state and local enforcement officers, former federal officers, and personnel with other federal agencies to remove illegal aliens who have failed to depart voluntarily. And that's why I think really at this time, it's important that we do talk about these issues and we do talk about the rights that all our students have while they're at school. The ACLU's response, in the first 100 days of President Donald Trump's second term, the ACLU has filed over 110 legal actions, including 53 lawsuits against this administration. These include challenging efforts to dismantle birthright citizenship, challenging the invocation of the 1798 Alien Enemies Act, and protecting free speech on campuses all around the country. But remember, just lawsuits are one part of the puzzle, and this is where it's important that community comes together. Mobilization, legislation, and solidarity are all important to advancing justice, regardless of how courts rule. Locally, the ACLU of Hawaii has advocated for several immigration bills, and we continue to meet with local immigration experts. And again, everyone in this call, I know there's over 100 people that have registered. You are an important part of this work, important part of ensuring that our democracy continues. I'm going to turn it over now to our legal fellow, Nathan, who will be talking more about our rights specifically.
Yeah, hi. My name is Nathan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm going to walk us through a little bit about further on the context of who is enforcing these immigration actions, and then we'll get into some of the Know Your Rights training. So just briefly, there's many different organizations that are part of the Department of Homeland Security, including the TSA, Customs and Border Protection, and U.S. Border Patrol. I think what might be more relevant for this training is the role of ICE. ICE is made up of several branches, and the one that most people know is Enforcement and Removal Operations, or ERO. And they typically are involved with removal of undocumented individuals who have been ordered to be removed from the United States. Another branch, Homeland Security and Investigations, or HSI, was typically tasked with being the investigative arm of ICE, so looking at child trafficking, national security, and terrorism interests, but has recently been kind of commandeered and repurposed to essentially do the same kind of work that Enforcement and Removal Operations was doing for ICE. So that's something to watch out for, in that there's been an expanded use of HSI under the guise of, say, wellness checks for child trafficking. And many of these individuals that are part of HSI wear plain clothes, and they may dress in uniforms that do not clearly mark that they are ICE agents rather than what they purport to be. So having said that, I think given time, we'll jump right into the Know Your Rights section. And we want to make clear at the outset that regardless of status, the courts in the United States have been very clear that people in the United States have constitutional rights, and these rights are protected by the First Amendment, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Eighth, 14th Amendment, and extensive case law. And so what we're presenting today are rights that you have regardless of your status and that you can use. So the first is the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. When dealing with ICE agents, we encourage folks to exercise their right to remain silent, especially if asked questions that might self-incriminate. So in this context, saying things like, I want to use my right to not answer questions, or I exercise my right to remain silent, is within your Fifth Amendment right. And we want to be clear that this means that you should not answer questions about criminal or immigration history when asked by ICE agents or by people who you suspect may be ICE agents. And additionally, don't lie or show false documents to enforcement agents or try to resist arrest. The one exception to this is that if you're driving under Hawaii law and also the law of other states, if you're pulled over, you may be required to provide your driver's license and insurance and vehicle registration to an officer. And so that might be a very limited exception to your silence, but otherwise, again, try not to provide any incriminating information or any false documents. Another part of the Fifth Amendment is protections on due process. And so people have a right to a hearing before they are deported. And the only exception to this is for expedited removal hearings. And these are proceedings for people who have been in the United States for less than 2 years. And in this case, the courts have found that there are not as robust due process protections. And so one consideration is to keep evidence that you have been present in the United States for longer than 2 years on your person. So this could look like rent statements or utility bills that show that you are not qualified for expedited removal, and therefore you have these Fifth Amendment due process rights prior to deportation. And then next, and perhaps most relevant, is the Fourth Amendment right against unlawful search and arrest. Generally, to access your home or other private locations, and we'll talk about this in the school context shortly, ICE needs your consent or a judicial warrant with a name or address on it to conduct a valid search and seizure. And the standard for this is these conditions need to be present where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy. So, for example, in your home, ICE would need your consent or a judicial warrant because you have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And so if you do not consent, you should be very clear that you do not consent and say, I do not consent, and make that extremely clear when dealing with ICE agents. Additionally, you should keep in mind the plain view doctrine, which says that when ICE is in a public space or any kind of enforcement officer is in a public space, they may have the ability to legally observe things that are in plain sight, even if they can't pick up the object or if they can't access the private space where they can where that sensitive information is. And so be careful to keep important or sensitive private information out of the site from public spaces. Related to this, we're going to get into what a judicial warrant requires. So we've covered consent. Now, if you do not consent, the only way that ICE can legally access a private location is through a judicial warrant. And a judicial warrant is very specific. It requires the signature of a judge, a specific name of a person, or a specific address where the search is to be conducted, and it needs the word warrant. And so what we're seeing is sometimes ICE enforcement officers will try to use an administrative warrant or a deportation order, which is not a judicial warrant and which does not allow access to private locations legally. And right now we'll show you what those look like. So this is a valid judicial warrant. This is what an example of what it might look like. You can see that there's a district court at the top, which shows you that it was issued by a court. And at the bottom, you can see that it's signed by a judge. So that's some of the key factors. And then additionally, I don't know if you can see this because of the image quality, but there is an address located on this piece of paper. And so these are kind of the major components to look for when you request to see a judicial warrant, to check if an ICE officer can legally search the premises over your Fourth Amendment concerns. Now, an administrative warrant, which does not grant these privileges, might look something like this. And it's, again, you can see it's not issued by a court, not signed by a judge. Instead, it's issued by ICE and signed by an immigration officer. And so it's important to keep this in mind when you're asking for a warrant or for other information from someone you suspect to be an ICE officer, and to be very clear that without a judicial warrant, they do not have your consent to search private locations. And then to wrap up, there's also a Sixth Amendment right to an attorney that all individuals have. The government in civil immigration cases is not required to provide an attorney, but they cannot hinder your access to an attorney. And so we want to be very clear that it's always advisable not to sign any documents without an attorney present and counseling you. and the government, again, cannot hinder your access to an attorney or your ability to ask for an attorney. Yeah, and just things to watch when we talk about general ICE behavior before we get into the specifics of schools. We have seen ICE agents sometimes lie or use different ruses about who they are or what they're doing. As I mentioned, this includes dressing in plain clothes. There's also been stories of ICE saying that they are the police or not, and identifying them specifically as immigration officers. And so I've put some examples here. I'll just walk through some of them briefly, but some examples of ruses that ICE may use are if they're stopping somebody in person, they'll say, you know, your son is the victim of identity theft and we need to talk to him. And, you know, once they get a conversation going, they might say, can we come inside, or can you come outside, or can your son come outside? And the goal there is either simply identification or even to arrest, detain, and deport an individual. And so being very clear about your right to remain silent and also your right to your privacy, and making sure that an officer has a judicial warrant and before, you know, engaging them further is incredibly important. We've also seen these types of ruses by phone. So somebody will call and say, you know, we found a lost ID. Do you want to come and pick it up from us at this location? And that'll be another way of leading to identification or even arrest, detention, and deportation. So these are things to watch out for when dealing with ICE. And we'll see a bit now from Liza on how these kind of interact in the school context specifically.
Great. And just a reminder that all of our keiki have the right to go to school. I know that is kind of self-evident for most of us here. We have a sister organization, the Tennessee Immigrant Refugee Advocacy Coalition, who just actually had to fight this in the state of Tennessee as it moved through both chambers. And so there is an active push to get this up to the Supreme Court, but all of us remember, and I think, you know, nobody in this call obviously holds those feelings, but if you hear those amongst, you know, folks that work at your school or anything, can always remind people that this is their right to be in these schools. Next slide. Okay. This one is just like a little bit complex for me, Nathan, so I'm going to throw it back to you.
Yeah, so this, just following up with your Fifth Amendment rights and your Fourth Amendment rights, generally, if ICE shows up at schools, you have no obligation to comply with them if they do not have a judicial warrant, especially in private locations, which schools should be careful to mark. So we also want to be you know, cognizant of the Department of Education and their recent guidance that says, you know, if officers are not complying or they're refusing to show you a warrant, or they're saying, we don't need a warrant, we're going to come into the school anyways, you should not try to physically impede them, but you should document them, record their behavior, and be clear that you have a right to record, so long as you don't directly physically interfere with the arrest. You know, further, an officer might say, there's an emergency, there's all these circumstances that mean we don't have time to talk to you, we just need immediate access to the school. You should be clear to ask open-ended questions, right? Who, what, when, where, and why type of questions. Not so instead of saying, is it an emergency, to which the answer might be a quick yes, ask questions like, you know, why do you think that there is an emergency, or what factors do you have in mind that require me to give you access to the school instead of having you talk to the principal or the vice principal? And so, and in all this, make sure that you're trying to communicate, you know, per the DOE guidance with your complex area superintendent and or with the superintendent's office. So just want to reiterate that when you're exercising these rights, you have a right to document, and you should document what's going on, and you should be very clear that you are not going to comply with ICE if they do not have the legal documents necessary to access school property.
And on that note, thank you so much, Nathan, is that we have been collecting, and we try to triage reports of ICE involvement at any school. We do not have, at this point in time, we do not have a confirmed report of an ICE activity on a school campus during school. but we do have multiple reports in the vicinity. And as you are documenting what is going on, please be, the exact date and time and the child and the location, whether it happened in a classroom or administrative or outside in the parking lot. All of those things are very, very valuable. And I'm sure you can send them to OSA or somebody at HSTA and they can get them over to us. We have aligned with the special agent in charge at the Homeland Security Investigation. They have agreed to verify whether or not they have conducted operations in sensitive locations. We sent some recent activities to them and they said this were not enough information. So I don't know if it's a little bit of a runaround, but the more clear we are on the information, hopefully we can get a firm yes or no of whether they conducted that. So interacting in those spaces, it is important, as Nathan and all the other attorneys have mentioned, that it's really important that public and private spaces. And so, the parking lot outside of your school, a pretty public space. A classroom is a pretty private space. You have to know the difference between those different spaces and make sure that you all know about FERPA and being compliant on not disclosing information. If you see a strange person in a strange uniform on your campus asking about for information, where is such and such student, I would not respond to that. And you can refer them to the front desk. Also being mindful that anything that you have out and in plain view, they can use that information. So just, I don't know, they would not be likely to come into your classroom, but if you had papers which your students' names on them, maybe flip those over. Next slide, Nathan or Emily. Okay. This has been a big issue, and I think especially in Kona, is that interacting with parents, right? So unfortunately, we've seen kind of two different situations that have been going on where we have seen interactions that have led to children being detained and deported. One is that Homeland Security Investigation has a list of 100 unaccompanied minors, mostly on Hawaii Island and on Maui, some on Oahu, that they are looking for. So those are for the purported purpose of a welfare check, but they may be looking for those children, and that might lead to their detention. What we have actually seen is that in the process of looking for those children, they have encountered other adults in the vicinity of where they've been looking for unaccompanied minors, and they have detained those adults. And those adults have chosen to be detained and deported with their own children, right? So that has led to a situation where a police officer went and removed a young boy from a school because his father requested that he be detained from him. What is really important is that adults who are in danger, who are fearful that they might be removed, that they have a clear plan and they have updated their contact lists for who should be called if they are not able to go to the school to pick up their child. This also means potentially signing a power of attorney if they feel as a parent that the best thing for their child is that their child not be detained and deported with the parent, then they need to have a power of attorney or a designated adult that is going to be the person who is both on the contact list for school for the next person to call, and that they have the legal rights to temporarily care for that child. Okay, so for teachers, I think it's really important that you don't have to know all of these things. I just want to relieve you of that. It's really important that you're exposing yourself to it. You can look back at this training. You can reach back out to any of us for continued validation on what you've learned in this space, but you don't have to know everything. You do need to know who you talk to at your school if you think something is going on. And I'm sure that you're going to get more guidance on that and a point person. I think those are great requests from HSTA to have that understanding. Everybody knows who they need to go talk to. Please do document, make sure you don't have children's faces in there. Try to stay focused on who the agent is. date, time, place, location, whether or not it happened just outside of campus. Oftentimes what we most likely see is something at pickup or drop off that's actually a block away from school, and it's not usually at school. So being mindful of that, know where the boundaries of your school, again, that doesn't change the life of the child or those families right there, but it does tell us whether or not they have changed their tactics and whether they're willing to come onto campuses or not. And that's important information. You know, keep names of children that might be on papers, other things out of plain view. Make sure that you do know the difference between a judicial and an administrative warrant. Super, super important. But again, also, once you see that paper, you're like, that's not me. I'm not the person who deals with this. Let's go find my principal, or let's go find the person who is in charge on this day of this issue, and immediately move towards that authorized person. And just make sure that you are not giving consent. I know that we are, you know, all of us we are helpful people who want to do the right thing, especially when authorities come and ask us something. But this is a difficult moment where you may need to say, we're not allowing you into our classroom. And I know who the authorized person is who I'm going to direct you to. Okay, Nathan, I can't read that from mine. Can your much younger eyes read that?
Yeah, no worries. This is just from the guidance that the Department of Education sent. So just including it here, you all should have gotten it. And it just kind of summarizes what to do in that situation. But I think for time, we can, if it comes up during the Q&A, we can talk about it further.
I'm gonna stop sharing screen so that panelists can see your faces as you're answering questions.
All right, thank you. We did have a number of questions come in, but before we go with that, I just want to also reiterate, or well, just let folks know that in your contract, there is verbiage regarding campus visitors. Your contract is always available at hsta.org/contract. And what it says is that requests by non-school personnel or students not enrolled in that school to visit a teacher's classroom or work area shall be granted by the principal or other immediate supervisor only in an emergency or when no other arrangement can be made, as determined by the principal or other immediate supervisor. Reasonable effort will be made to notify the teacher of visitors prior to sending them to the classroom or work area. But most importantly, reasonable effort will be made to confine the visits of police officers or officers of the court to the administrative building. They shall be sent directly to a teacher's classroom or work area only in the case of an emergency or when the circumstances are beyond the control of the principal or other immediate supervisor. In the case of an emergency and when no other arrangements can be made, faculty members may be assigned to supervise students while teachers confer with police officers and/or officers of the court. With that, I want to ask Representative Tokuda if she has anything else she wants to add before we move on to questions.
No, let's go ahead and take questions. You know, and I would just tell you that there's a lot of stuff in the Reconciliation Act. I know that there is some concerns about rollbacks to the Compact Impact Fairness Act. We are looking through that now to make sure that it is absolutely protected. Once we, you know, hear anything, if anything's been rolled back, please know that we will alert all of you so that we can quickly, you know, push against this, and we'll definitely need your help. But thank you again to all the presenters, and let's get to the questions so we can have that discussion.
So there were a number of questions that have been submitted in advance and also questions that are coming in now. So some of the questions are, what actions can Governor Green take to ensure that state and local law enforcement aren't involved in federal kidnapping?
Well, I think that there's right now in conversations that we've had, so our law enforcement is divided by counties. And so you have, you know, Honolulu Police Department, Maui Police Department. We also have our Department of Law Enforcement, which is a little bit smaller, and a sheriff's organization. So the state is over all of those, but there's also opportunities to interface with your chiefs of police at the county level. Currently, we do not have any of our officers that are deputized with the powers to conduct immigration enforcement. There are, many of you probably saw all the articles over the last couple of months where there are memorandums of understanding with organizations like Homeland Security investigations. Those do not currently like I said, do not currently deputize our local police to conduct immigration enforcement, but it does create a type of relationship between them. And folks should know that because of the information sharing through networks that have been connected for a couple of decades now. So if you are pulled over and driving for like a DUI or something and you're arrested, your information will go to a database that is shared with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. That is baked in. So there are levels of collaboration that just exist at a basic level that our local police are not necessarily opting into. What the governor can do is that it can, preemptively sign an agreement to say that Hawaii is not, and no law enforcement agency in Hawaii is going to sign a 287G agreement to voluntarily give our own time and money to conduct ICE operations. That is something that's a possibility out there. And I think we could also see from the governor, a little bit more of a clear statement on the state's position on some of these issues.
Thank you very much. Next question. I have a student whose father has been detained by ICE. She doesn't know where he is. How can we advocate and help our students?
For that particular question, we are so lucky to have the Hawaii Association of Immigration, or Hawaii, oh gosh, HILA. Anyways, the Immigration Attorneys of Hawaii have a deportation defense hotline. They may be able to take a call and try to find this particular individual through their A number at the Federal Detention Center. I would say, for the teacher in question, I'll put my email in the chat. If you want to email me, I'd personally be willing to follow up on it and make sure that we can. I can't even imagine the pain of not knowing where your dad is.
Sergio, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would say this for anyone, and I'm not sure exactly what we can do, but if you reach out to our office, we need privacy release forms completed. Then what we can do is we can try to get information on, the individual's behalf to the best ability we can by inquiring with ICE, Homeland Security, whoever we have to. So when in doubt, we can tell you if there's things we can't do. But if you're in a situation, please, we can put my website into the chat. All we need you to do is contact our office. We just need a privacy release so that we can go ahead and ask questions on your behalf. So do that anytime, even if you're not quite sure. We want to be as helpful as possible.
And then also, if I could just add, yes, remember to contact the legal service providers that were listed earlier, the Legal Clinic, Roots Reborn, and along with the Office of Representative Tokuda, they can refer you to the right organization if need be.
Thank you. I will also mention that HSTA is working with our National Education Association to provide legal services for immigrants who have immigration-related questions. We're setting that up now with the National Education Association, and we'll hope to be able to announce that availability soon as well. Next question, are there resources available to share with our parents, families, and especially those who are ELL families, English Language Learner families?
Yeah, so we'll have on our ACLU of Hawaii website, we have a Know Your Rights link that has we've done a number of trainings around ICE, depending on what the community is asking, and those trainings are there. As well as somebody had asked on the Zoom webinar about Know Your Rights card. I've gone ahead and put a link to the card. So actually your schools can go ahead, your school administrator can go ahead and print that off, cut the cards at school, give them to everybody. We have some, and when you see us table in the community, we're happy to hand them out, but to get the information out there sooner, you might want to just print and cut yourself. But all of this information about Know Your Rights, as well as accompanying presentations, are on our ACLU website under resources, Know Your Rights.
If you want very short little videos in language, you can go to our Instagram and our website. We can put that in the chat, www.hicir.org. We've tried to condense some of this information into like 90-second, 2-minute videos Ilocano, Tagalog, Spanish, Chuukese, Marshallese, and Tongan. So if those are the languages for your ELL families that you're looking for, they're not super long, but they will give you the gist in about 90 seconds, 2 minutes.
And Rep Tokuda, I know you have some as well on your website.
Yes, we're trying to get more information up as well. I do believe that Senators Hirono and Schatz also have some resources, but if we can go ahead and I don't know if someone can help me just put into the chat for other participants our website and also specifically help with the federal agency. And we can get you some direct questions and also have to link you up with the resources and folks you see on the screen right now.
Yep, I just sent it on the chat for all participants.
Thank you.
And also, if I could just add, this is a room full of educators, so teachers can really make sure, that students know their rights. We'd be happy, to participate in know your rights trainings, to your classrooms. I think that's something in terms of civics education that we could be helpful for. So we'll just put it out there. I know summer break is coming up soon, but as we continue to prepare, those are some options that we could possibly do.
Absolutely, yes. And while we want to know our rights, we want to also make sure that our school personnel, and while our letter said that we want our school administrators to be trained, we also know that our front office staff needs to be trained as well, because the administrator isn't necessarily in the front office at all times. And so it's really important that our front office staff know what to do in these situations. And similarly, what should bystanders know and do to be most helpful? What are things bystanders are likely to do that are not helpful?
Yeah, like we said, making sure you document what's going on. You know the time that it was happening, where it was happening, and who was involved is important. I know that there was some questions in the chat about other alternative forms of action. We want to be clear and stick to the DOE guidance of not physically impeding when an action is happening, and just being sure to document what's going on, and making very clear your lack of consent. I think that's the big thing to remember. A second kind of action that people can take beforehand is to clearly mark certain locations as private. And so I know that there was also questions about that. And so that could look like signs saying this is a private area, or these classrooms are closed to the public, or even we've seen some schools have a security guard and a kind of a sign-in or check-in station at the main entrance of the school to clearly show that it's not open to the public. And so those are some ideas that folks can think of preventatively, but before an enforcement action happens at a school. But if folks have any others, please add on.
I'm looking at the Know Your Rights immigrant cards that was put into our chat. I don't know if it was put into the chat for everyone, so if that could be placed there again. I will also mention that if teachers want Know Your Rights cards, we have those red cards as well that we're willing to print in all the different languages. If you want to just call HSTA and give us your information and where you want that, we will absolutely send you those cards as well. So there are resources that are now in the chat. But again, if you just want, HSTA is more than willing to mail you copies of those cards as well. I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to pass it over to Emily, who has some of the questions that are in the chat that have been submitted right now that she might want to bring up.
Great, everyone. So some of the questions have been resolved already. You should be able to see them. Maybe a softball question first. Does a classroom constitute a private location? We might have answered that already. Does somebody want to take it?
And so, generally there's areas of the school that are more public, the general lobby area, the parking lot. Our schools in Hawaii, it's a little bit unique because most of them are open air, right? You can just, all the classrooms are pretty open. It's a little bit different from some buildings on the continent where there's probably just, limited points of entry. But, those classrooms, are private. We were more private than they are than, the lobbies that welcome the general public. So I think that's where the distinction can be made. If you just think about it, right, you can't have a random stranger walk into your classroom and just decide to sit down. But you can have a stranger, walk into the lobby and talk to the front desk staff. So those are, I would say, the distinctions between public and private in terms of the school system.
Okay. And is this information being shared with UPW? Their members are custodial staff and the demographics are largely comprised of immigrants.
Is there a way that we can get someone who can relay that information back to them, perhaps a good email address? If so, I'm gonna go ahead and put Sergio's email into the chat for everyone, and then he will go ahead and send you all this recording as well as these resources afterwards, if possible, so you can share those out.
I believe there's also a representative from AFSHME who is one of the observers, and so I can get in touch with him as well and provide those resources. And then Representative Tokuda.
Yeah, Salma, what I can do, I was texting with Kalani from UPW earlier this evening. I will pass this on as well to Kalani, to Randy, to others, because I do think for a lot of folks, it's just going to be important information they have, whether it's questions in their workforce or their daily life. So, if we can connect them with you, if there is an interest and a desire, we'd be happy to help facilitate something very similar to what we're doing right now with them.
Great, thank you, Rep.
Go ahead. I just wanted to say real quick, I know there's more questions than time that we do have, Osa, and even the questions that were submitted. I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. I think we'd be happy to do this Q&A again and continue the conversation, or if you want us to take a few more questions, just let us know. I understand Representative Tokuda is on the East Coast as well, but I think just for me, this signifies that there is really a growing demand for more Know Your Rights presentations, and really with all our partners here and with the ACLU Hawaii, we're going to try to our best to meet that demand.
Absolutely, and I know with summer coming that there may be some learning loss, let's just say, during the summer. So perhaps we can do something again as we look at towards the end of the summer as we start the new school year again. Thank you everyone so much for being here. Mahalo to all of you teachers who are out there and who are just concerned for your students, and for our fellow faculty members who shouldn't have to be afraid, to just be here to do what we need to do for our keiki. Appreciate all of you involved, and we will definitely make this information available to as many people as possible. As you see, it's also going to be on the ACLU Hawaii website. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you to everyone on here. We hope that you all have a great evening. Mahalo.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.